Hello, I'm here with Doug. It is Friday, January 6th, 2024, and we're going to talk about DNA facial recognition and other things. But first, you got more information about this Verizon lawsuit.
Yeah, so this is pretty funny, I think. So last episode we talked about Verizon and there was a class action lawsuit against them, and they added, I believe it was a $3 charge to everybody's bill.
Yeah,
And and right now I've forgotten what the term that's on the bill, but it's something that sounds like a government recovery, fee that people would say, okay, that's one of those government charges.
a junk
So
fee.
junk fee, yeah, yeah. But it's wrapped in a name that sounds more government-like, that it's a tax, so to speak, or
Yeah.
that's being collected on behalf of the government. But it's not. It goes directly to Verizon's bottom line.
Hmm.
So Verizon has agreed to settle the lawsuit, but they did not agree to stop paying or stop charging customers.
Right.
And it turns out that by the settlement in the lawsuit, even though I think Verizon is paying out $100 million, they're profiting off the lawsuit. And then this week, I can't believe this, I got an email from Verizon. Verizon said, essentially, customers, your bill will be going up $4 per phone line. Kind of like PG&E, huh?
Yeah. Well,
They
I'm
get caught and they increase your rate.
well, yeah, that's why, in a sense, these lawsuits against like public utilities are kind of pointless. They sue PG&E, so it just raises your rate because what else can it do? So, what exactly was the point of that?
Yeah, yeah. So Verizon could say we're just raising everybody's rate, but no, they masked it and now they're actually coming out further ahead.
Yeah, well, I mean, maybe they should just call it the lawsuit settlement fee. And well, in the Uber supposedly did this when it came out that Uber had not done background checks on their drivers and they were killing and raping people. Uber decided the solution was to add a $1 driver safety fee to every charge and do nothing else. But they just get some money, and now it looks like they did something.
So I believe Airbnb is doing the same thing,
Yeah,
something similar.
yeah.
All right, Sam, what do you got? What's your first
Well, the first
first
one
one
caught
for
my
today?
attention because I actually took a cruise in Norway and it was wonderful, but they say these things are horrible. You shouldn't use them. There's a new thing called the Icon of the Seas, a new cruise ship, 250,000 tons, and they say these things pollute like crazy, which I hadn't really thought of. Uh, they say cruise tourism demand is at an all-time high,
Right
and
now?
yeah, apparently, which surprises me because
Wow.
COVID, I didn't want to go. Remember, in COVID, they kept sending them out and then they had to cancel them and everybody got sick.
Yep.
COVID is still around, but I guess people just got over paying attention. But anyway,
Okay.
but they have amazing statistics about the pollution, saying I think, yeah, they dump a lot of methane, which is 80 times more potent. And according to the EPA, an average cruise ship emits more soot per day than 1 million cars. And cruise ships make up 1% of the boats, but account for more than 6% of the world's black carbon emissions. So just sounds amazing.
So, Sam, help
Yeah.
me understand this. There are not as many cruise ships as there are cargo ships. Could we agree on that? There are far more cargo ships,
I
don't you
would
think?
I would imagine, I guess, yeah.
And from what I know is cruise ships as well as cargo ships, they burn the least expensive, the worst oil that you can get. In other words, when they do the fracking, right, you take out gasoline, you take out kerosene, all these jet fuel, and what's left over is absolute worst, filthiest material you can burn. And they sell that to the cruise ships and also to the cargo ships.
Well, I didn't know that, but it does make sense because the cruise ship can take an arbitrary amount of weight. So it would seem like, yeah, they would just get whatever's cheapest.
Yeah, yeah, the least expensive,
Yeah,
but it also pollutes the most.
yeah.
And the term for it just escapes me right now, in terms of what it's called in terms of fuel. And we could look that up on Wikipedia, but let's not waste our time on that.
Yeah.
But it's interesting that they're just going after the cruise ships. Why not the cargo ships?
Well, the cargo ships are less optional. You know, they just think people should quit giving up cruises are not necessary, and they just want to start like a civil resistance where you sneer at people at cruise ships. There was a similar campaign a few years ago where a guy would go around in parking lots and put a bumper sticker on all the SUVs that say, "I'm changing the climate. Ask me how."
Yeah, yeah, okay, okay.
So,
So this is sort of an attack against the cruise industry, if you
right,
will.
right. They're saying the
Yeah.
cruise industry is a wasteful mess and we really shouldn't have it, which is interesting.
And
Kind of reminds me of the Democrats are going to take away your hamburgers and your gas stove, all of which are not entirely stupid, but you know, there's I like things like this where you be aware of it. Just banning it, I don't like so much.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I got it. So, they were there was an attack a few years ago, maybe more than that, against the airlines. Same issue, just how
Yeah,
much they pollute.
I know. And I thought after the pandemic and everybody got used to using Zoom, that business travel would decline, but it doesn't seem to have happened. It seems to have sprung right back.
Yeah,
And I
yeah,
think,
I would think so too.
yeah, well, you know, you would think that companies would save money by just using Zoom instead of face-to-face meetings, but I think there's something about face-to-face meetings that make them valuable.
No, face to face, if you're doing a business negotiation, you want face to face. You don't want Zoom.
And this semester, I got a lot more students in the classroom than I have in the last couple semesters. I've always made it so it's optional, and it got
Yeah.
down to where there's only one or two students in the classroom, but now I've got like 8 or 10. So
Ah,
more students seem to be making this decision, which I would also make, that I'd much rather physically be there. I will definitely learn more if I'm really there than if I Zoom in.
yeah. Are you familiar, speaking of travel, I'm going to kind of go on a tangent here a bit. Are you familiar with Veritasium YouTube channel, Derek
Their chat.
Melber? Yeah. So it's interesting. He brought up a topic about the man who in the 1920s has polluted most or killed polluted more people than anyone else on earth. And he's the scientist that decided or figured out for General Motors how to add lead to gasoline, tetraethyl lead.
Right,
And the sad part is, so we added lead to gasoline for over 50 years, and the lead comes out the tailpipe,
right.
right?
It
And
improves the burning in the engine somehow, right?
well, what it did was Ford had a better performing engine that could virtually burn alcohol, kerosene, gasoline. It could burn a wide variety of fuels. GM kind of went the cheaper route and they made a less, I don't know, less tolerant engine that would knock a lot.
Uh,
And so this chemist worked for, I believe, over a year, maybe two, and figured out that tetraethyl lead added to gasoline prevents the knocking and the pinging.
right,
Now, in the 1970s, 75-ish, we started to phase out lead in gasoline. And cars had to have a heck of a time knocking and pinging. That was kind of a side byproduct of that.
hmm
Anyway, we removed lead from gasoline, and it's been that way for, shoot, I guess 70 years. But what's interesting is if you go by freeways and you do soil samples, like out here, I live in the East Bay, San Francisco Bay Area, and lead levels are still very high, and they tell people not to grow food in it because of the lead levels.
Yeah, it'll take a long time for it to go away. And now we put ethanol in, which is a similar kind of scam, although I think it's not directly harmful to humans, but it's harmful to the global food supply.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And there are subsidies that the corn farmers get.
Right.
But let me kind of finish this conversation.
Yeah.
Lead, I don't believe was ever added to jet fuel, but
Oh,
but lead is and lead was and is still added to av fuel or aviation, general aviation.
hmm.
So any engine in an airplane that's a piston engine, to the best of my knowledge, is avgas, and it's still using lead based or it has lead. still in it.
That seems like a really bad idea, putting it up in the sky where it's going to come out in the rain and get everywhere.
Well, yeah, and the concern is, and I don't know if any studies have been done on this, but for airports that are in a city, as the planes take off, that lead is raining down over schools, shopping centers, people's homes.
Yeah, yeah. I'm right near the airport. There's like seems like 50 flights a day go over me, so probably plenty of it here.
Yeah, yeah. And is that general aviation or is that jets?
Oh, I think
You
it's
don't know.
commercial jet.
Both.
It's SFO, so I think it's all the big Boeing 707s. They're all
Well,
grounded
but
right now.
yeah, but you've got the small commuter flights, and those would be a piston engine.
Oh yeah, could be.
Yeah, yeah.
I think
So
right now I think right now, especially with the big grounding of all these jets, I think every airplane is packed to the max. They're using every plane they can to meet the demand.
yeah, you mean over the Bolt issue with
Yeah,
the Boeings? Yeah.
yeah,
Boy, is Boeing looking bad on that one right now.
yeah. In fact, that's my next story. There's a whistleblower.
Ah,
A whistleblower came out and said uh, on a social network, so I don't think it's been verified who this guy is, but the story sounds very reasonable, saying he's explaining what's going on. Um, the reason the door blew off is very, very stupid. Their assembly line quality control is terrible. So many, many airplanes are kicked back for rework to where it floods the rework yards. They have too much work and they start doing sloppy, hasty work. And so in order to make it faster, he talked about a case where they have a exit door with a plug. That's what the real issue is directly, is when they have space for a door, but they don't put a door in. Instead, they put in a plug.
so
And
so Sam, do you
yeah,
know why they do that? Just so everybody knows.
I don't know.
So what they do is the FAA requires evacuation of 90 seconds using half of the exit doors.
Oh,
So when there's a plane crash, a fire comes along, everybody on that plane should be able to be evacuated within 90 seconds using half of the exits, which makes sense.
yeah.
They put in the plug doors, and the reason to do that is the airline has configured the plane for less passengers.
Uh,
But the plane can be reconfigured to put more passengers in, but when you do, you need to make those plug doors an exit door.
yeah,
And I've been looking into this. There are 4 bolts that hold that plug door in,
right.
and it kind of has to go out and up, and then it's spring loaded, so it flies off.
Yeah.
So let me let you continue, and I've got a little bit more I can add to this story for you.
Yeah, sure. But I mean, that's the point. And here's the number. He says, this check job that should find minimal defects has in the past 365 calendar days recorded 392 non-conforming findings on 7037 mid-fuselage door installations. So it's an outrageous number, hideously high and alarming number. And so in this incident, they found that there were no bolts holding the door in place. And that's because they had to something like they had to fix it. And in order to make it go through faster, an executive decided to not count removing the plug as opening the door because there would be more paperwork involved.
So
So,
so let me clarify for you.
yeah,
Um, this gets a little complex. They
yeah.
needed to replace a gasket along the door because it wasn't sealing. And there are 2 ways you could replace the gasket. One is to loosen the bolts and push the door out, but not remove the door. And then you could get in there, you could replace the gasket and reseal it.
Mhm.
If you do that, it's not considered a door removal.
Right.
So it doesn't get the higher level of QA check as if the door would have been removed. Now, there's another part to this story, and maybe I'm going to step on top of you a little bit, but let me share what I know. Spirit is the company in Kansas City that makes the fuselage that installs the plug door. And I believe that they're the ones who are responsible for the bolts. Now, they have a QA system that when the fuselages get sent to Boeing, there's a checklist that they go through and they have their computer system. And here we go, their computer system does not communicate with Boeing's quality assurance computer system. So somebody has to manually, or there's some translation, or nothing happens. I don't think that that's been publicly made between Spirit and Boeing. And the number of defects from Spirit going to Boeing have been so high that Spirit has had to send a crew to Boeing to remediate all the issues that are found by Boeing back in these fuselages before they can continue on. So there's a big backlog that's going on here. And it kind of reminds me of a story that I heard years ago about GM in Fremont with their assembly line, where the assembly line was going so fast and the employees couldn't stop the assembly line. So if they didn't have time to put a bolt in, you forgot about it, and the car would be sent off to the dealership without the bolt, or something
Yeah,
missing on the car. So same story again, except this is a little bit more troubling when we come to airplanes.
it is. Yeah. So I'm glad I'm not flying that much anymore.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and it's Alaska Airlines, and I think Alaska thought initially that this would be something that would be taken care of right away, a week or two. And as the FAA keeps looking in, it's looking worse and worse and worse for Boeing right now.
Well, there's one bright light. The Supreme Court verdict that's expected to come would end the administrative state, so agencies like the FAA can no longer expose things like this.
Oh, well, that's good.
Yeah, there you go.
That's the solution,
Yeah,
which kind of brings me into another one. Can I move on to my
yeah,
next story
yeah, go
here?
ahead. Yeah.
All right, this is in California, right? We have a politician that wants cars to have technology to prevent drivers from speeding, and speeding is defined as 10 miles over the speed limit.
And I think this has been true of many commercial vehicles for quite a while.
Yeah, so they have mechanical governors,
Yeah,
but they are set up, or it could be an electronic governor, but they're set up so that they can't, so the vehicle can't exceed a specific speed limit.
yeah,
This law is, or this politician wants the cars to have technology to know what the speed limit is, and then limit the car. So if you're going through a school zone, I believe it's 25 miles an hour. So you can't go more than 35. And I would argue 35 in a school zone doesn't make sense, but
yeah, yeah.
or on the freeway, if it's 65, 55, you can only go 65. But shoot, in California, most of us are driving 80 miles an hour on the freeway, or pretty close. We're 10, 15 over.
Yeah.
So what are the problems with that? What do you see, Sam?
Well, it's people will complain just like taking my gun away. Um, I, I, it's like any other, like seat belts. People scream bloody murder about seat belts when they came out. I think I would like to see it personally because I'm not a fast driver. I'm trying to drive so around the limit and cars are screaming around me. And even when I go as fast as everybody else, there's some idiot going 100 miles an hour, weaving in and out, missing us by inches. I mean, since the pandemic, there has been no traffic law enforcement apparently, and 911 has turned into the Autobahn.
Yeah,
I remember
yeah.
one
So
time I was driving during the pandemic, about a year ago, I was driving down to like San Jose, and this race car, one of these things half the size, went zipping by at 100, and another. Three cars were just having a real drag race right through the traffic.
on 101 or
101,
280?
just right through, going like easily 40 miles an hour faster than any of us. Because I guess they figured out there's no cops who can do this. And
Yeah.
I haven't seen the flaming wreckage coming from this, but it seems like it would be the consequence. So, I wouldn't mind seeing it, but I wouldn't really mind banning assault weapons or a bunch of things. I guess I'm a pinko fascist.
Yeah, but here's the deal. Do you use Google or Apple Maps, MapQuest?
Yeah.
How accurate is it?
Well, actually, this is a continual problem. Google is accurate, but it has tiny little spidery lines and tiny letters I can't see. Apple is less accurate, but I can see it. So those are my choices. I can see directions that will get me to the wrong place, or there are good directions that I can't see.
Yeah, so here's the question. who's going to maintain this database of all the speed limits? And if
Oh,
there's a
it's already
construct,
there. I mean, I've noticed my navigator already has the speed limit up in the corner. In fact, I often look there because it's a lot more accurate than me trying to remember what last sign I saw.
yeah, but if you go into an area where there's no GPS service or cellular service is marginal, that means your car might slow down while you're on the freeway to 35 miles an hour.
I suppose that might happen, but I think the chance is very small, and I think they would fix it quickly because people would complain.
Yeah, we'll see. I will say, I do agree with you. Construction zones, that would be helpful to mandate.
But I think it'll
But
never happen. I think it's just like
yeah, it's not.
your
I don't.
hamburgers, your gas stoves, your guns. Americans don't want to be told I can't drive 100 miles an hour.
Yeah, but California is the one that implemented all the smog controls.
Yeah,
And
but this is the smog control is just like once every couple of years you have to go in for a test. This would actually impair your fundamental freedom to it's like I don't know. I think people will not tolerate this. The
no, no, no,
Americans,
no, no. The smog, all the added smog equipment
yeah,
reduces performance of cars.
uh,
And that was the big complaint about it and still is.
yeah,
And California came up with the strictest air regulations because we had some of the worst pollution.
yeah.
And so you got to thank our legislators
Well, now you
because,
got Teslas which go plenty fast. So,
right, right, right.
so
But it was California legislators that, when was the last smog day that we've had in California, or at least Northern
yeah,
California?
I've never heard of
It
one.
Yeah, it's been at least 50 years, except for forest fire days.
Yeah, those are pretty
But
impressive.
yeah, but that brown, thick smog
Yeah,
that would hang over the Bay Area, I can remember that. And sometimes it would be weeks at a time. And it wasn't until one of the last forest fires that I realized, boy, when was the last time we had a smog day? And I looked it up and I think it was back in the late 70s.
yeah,
So thank you, politicians, for cleaning our air.
yeah. I appreciate the clean air, and I
Yep,
don't, and I think I would be happy with speed governors, but it's not going to happen.
it's not going to happen. I would agree.
Yeah.
All right, what do
All right.
you got?
So I found one that I thought was very interesting, especially now that I'm consulting for a critical infrastructure company. I'm going to teach a class in OT security. And so I'm interested in attacks that attack physical hardware, industrial hardware. The first one, of course, was Stuxnet, where the United States and Israel, with I think Germany, took down the Iranian isotope separators. But and then there were a bunch of there were water treatment plants that got hacked by the Russians within the last year. A couple of them happened. And but this one is very impressive. A group of Israel-linked hackers took over a steel mill in Iran because
Okay.
and they destroyed it. They burned it to the ground because they managed to impair the operation of the function of the steel mill so that what a person who knows about steel mills said what they probably did was skip the outgassing step. When you have molten steel, apparently there's gas in it, and there's some step where you get the gas out. And if you don't, it has a bubble in there, and that causes it to uh, wobble around and dump the molten steel in the wrong place. And that's what they did. And they have a video of a surveillance camera. They monitored it and posted it. And so they claimed that the surveillance camera showed that they were careful not to hurt anybody. But other people looked at the video. And in fact, there are two workers running away, barely escaping having this molten steel land on top of them. But they did get the molten steel to land in the wrong place and set fire to the thing and burn it down. So that's a very impressive physical damage and life-threatening damage from a cyber attack. And I thought this is important because it helps people understand the importance of OT security. Operational technology security is the big one now. Our power plants, factory equipment, aircraft control towers, and everything, all using these old-fashioned protocols like Modbus, and they're connected now to the internet. And there's a huge security problem there that is not simple to solve.
Yeah, I've run across that too with CAN bus,
Yeah,
which is another one of these protocols that came out in the 70s,
right,
which was before TCP/IP or any of the computer protocols, and it was used for industrial controls.
right,
And now what we're doing is there's so much of that out there that we have to bridge that into the TCP/IP world or internet world.
right.
And you're right. There are hard-coded passwords and firmware that cannot be changed.
Oh, there's things
You
like Modbus has no password at all, no facility for it.
Yeah, yeah.
It's
And there's no security with the protocol. If you have Wireshark, you can decode that protocol or a lot of those protocols.
That's right. It reminds me of satellites. It came out a while ago. Satellites are mostly using completely unauthenticated APIs, essentially, because when they were put up there, nobody would have a base station except the authorized government. So they thought there was no threat. Now you
Exactly.
and these things were designed. It was just supposed to be electronically controlling the factory from like a control panel in the factory. Nobody thought about the internet.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So I mean, it makes sense how we got here, but it has created a situation where they showed how the thing they attacked was in on Shodan as public, and there's thousands of others. Now the attack procedure is very clear. Just what pen testers do: you go to Shodan, you scan for vulnerable devices, then you try to find a device with no password or default password, and then you're in.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we need to make it more difficult than that.
Well, speaking of this,
Yeah.
any more on that, or
Oh, go ahead.
let's talk about Microsoft.
All right.
So this is a big one that came out. Microsoft is a victim of an attack similar to the Colonial Pipeline, which was password spraying
Yeah.
to a server that was in some back closet that somebody kind of forgot about. And they went after executives' accounts. So Microsoft hasn't really given a lot of information about this, but let's kind of take a look at this. They claim that it was a state sponsor, it was a Russian
Cozy,
state sponsored actor
cozy
known
bear,
as,
famous ones.
yeah, known as Nobelium. But they were also known as Midnight Blizzard. And one of the things that these state sponsored attackers were going off was to figure out, are they Nobelium or Midnight Blizzard, because Microsoft had been tracking them. But what they were able to do is go after passwords. And it was an attack again against a server that hadn't been updated. And they were able to get in and then do a lateral attack and move around.
And obviously
Now,
two-factor authentication.
no two-factor
Yeah.
authentication, right? So this is kind of embarrassing on Microsoft's part. So when you have an embarrassing secret leak that you have to make public, when do you announce it?
There's still,
Friday night,
oh, okay.
Friday afternoon at 4:45. So that way you make it public, and that's Pacific time. Or
Right.
I suppose you could also do Hawaiian time.
Yeah.
But typically when there's a breach like this that, you know,
Yeah.
PR wants this to be not made public mainstream, you
Yep.
do it on a Friday late in the afternoon.
Mm-hmm.
So Microsoft, this attack was back in November, and Microsoft this week is finally released a few of the details, but not much, and there's not enough to go on. But I got to tell you, when they talk about it, state sponsored, that this is Russian, Sam, this is a password spraying attack.
I know.
Couldn't a 12-year-old do this?
Well, yeah, and I wonder how accurate this attribution stuff is anyway. I remember a few years ago they said if you hire Mandiant, they will blame the Chinese, and if you hire CrowdStrike, they will blame the Russians. It's like I wonder about this attribution stuff, if it's really that accurate.
I got to too. And, you know, to say it's a state sponsored actor,
Well, I mean,
I mean,
there was a
look,
time 10 years ago when the Chinese would be incredibly blatant. They would just hack you right directly from an IP address that was at like the military college right next to the military base. So you
yeah,
really knew they were doing it because they didn't have the slightest OPSEC. But the Russians have always been sneakier, and I think the Chinese are sneakier too now. So
yeah,
you
but
can be more careful.
this is a password spray attack,
I know. What do you?
which,
I know.
but I mean, why would a state sponsored
Well,
this is,
oh, well, state-sponsored attackers will use whatever technique works.
I
But
understand,
the
but
and
it's not,
the only way to authenticate who they are would be with the later stages of malware they implant, which might actually be traceable to previous code. But even then, you don't know whether it's that person who originated it or someone who stole that code and is framing them.
True, but this is not a sophisticated attack. It's
Oh,
not like the steel
no,
mill.
no, no.
This is a very simple one that you probably teach students to do in your one of your cybersecurity classes.
Sure, sure. And
Yeah.
I mean, that's a nation state actor, like any military, will use appropriate attacks to get the job done.
All right. All
They'll use
right.
a simple attack if the target is a WIMP, which Microsoft apparently is, which is, I think, the real story. Why is Microsoft not hauling basic cyber hygiene when they're clearly critical infrastructure? Everybody's using Office 365. Microsoft really should be protecting it better.
Yeah, and just so we're clear on this with everyone, this did not affect customers. It did not affect any of Microsoft's code.
Well,
At least
I thought they
that's
got
what
into some companies' Outlook 365 accounts.
those were internal Microsoft executives.
Oh, okay.
But Microsoft made it clear, this is their statement, not mine. So you can believe what Microsoft is saying or not,
Yeah.
but none of their customers' data or any of Microsoft code was compromised.
Yeah,
We'll
but
see.
usually people say that, and then every time they get caught, they back down another one step and say, well, they didn't get credit card numbers. Well, they only got a few credit card numbers. Well, they only got half of our customers. I've seen this a million times, you know.
I agree. That's why I'm
Yeah,
careful to say
yeah,
we don't know the facts. We can only
yeah,
repeat what Microsoft is making public.
yeah.
Along with this, I'll bring this up. I don't know if you know this, but the entire Ukrainian government is using Azure.
Oh, well, I guess they can't use infrastructure in their own country since it's getting bombed all the time. I guess that makes
Yeah, yeah. So, Microsoft has a nice income, as I think does Elon with Starlink from Ukraine.
well, if Russia decided to take a bad attitude, they could now regard Microsoft as like involved in the war and a legitimate target.
Yeah, but the problem is Russia's using Microsoft software as well, I'm sure.
Well, that would make it more convenient. Microsoft should rent an Azure server and then strike the Ukrainian Azure server.
Yeah, but with Azure you can distribute it across the globe. So
When Azure first came out, of course, the very first thing I tried to do was connect to Azure and use it to attack other Azure machines with IP version 6 attacks. And they thought of that. I couldn't do it. They didn't turn on IPv6. I knew a bunch of cool IPv6 attacks. And
yeah.
Microsoft disabled IPv6 for a long time, thwarting my evil intent.
Well,
So,
I do know early on with Azure, if you had an account
yeah.
and you stopped paying, Microsoft would then allocate your disk space to another customer without wiping it.
Amazon did that too in the early days.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
then wised up.
So
I assume
yeah,
Microsoft wised up and knocked that off.
yeah, early on. So
Yeah,
that's not
yeah.
a current attack, just to
No,
make
but
that clear.
it's a common flaw.
Yeah.
All right, let's see.
Do
And
you have another one?
I do.
I've
In fact,
got one.
I got one which I think it was the one I decided I'd make the title because I was amazed by this. So they had an old case on my 2017 where they had the DNA from somebody. They got DNA from dead body from the attacker or something, and they decided they wanted to catch this guy. So they went to a company that claims from a DNA sample they can predict what your face will look like. And
So
then they take
so
that and run it through facial recognition and finger somebody. And the EFF and all the people are saying this is voodoo. You might as well just do astrology. The accuracy of all this is beyond stupid, but it happened at least once. And many police departments are saying they like this. This is great. We're going to do more of this.
so let me tell you, what you're talking about is phenotyping. So when you have somebody's DNA,
Yeah.
you've got their genetic profile, and there is a company that has used phenotyping um, against FBI profiling of like a serial killer. I can't remember exactly what the case was, but this was pre-COVID. And what they did was the FBI had a profile on somebody. They profiled what the crimes were.
Yeah.
And somebody decided to do a DNA phenotype. And what the FBI came up with for the profile did not match what the DNA phenotype was. And so they used the phenotype to eliminate a number of suspects because that you have a genotype and a phenotype. The
Yeah.
phenotype is what's expressed. The genotype is what's in your genes, which can be expressed or recessive. Little biology lesson
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
So what's happened is they've been able to identify, and I don't know. Again, they're not able to identify a specific suspect. It's not IDing somebody, but what they're doing is they're able to eliminate.
Yeah,
And
that's the point. They say this would be accurate enough to like say the guy has red hair, therefore you can remove the people that don't have red hair. But running it through facial recognition is just stupid. I mean, even with a real photograph of somebody, facial recognition is wrong a
uh,
lot of the time. And you've got this sort of mock-up of what they might look like, which is not accurate enough at all for facial recognition, but they're using it. And that's why people are getting worried about this. It reminds me of HB Gary Federal, where the guy claimed he could correlate Twitter with Facebook and identify which hacker hacked people, and it was totally inaccurate. And for a while, people tried to arrest the members of Anonymous based on this. And then they found out it was all just bogus.
no,
It's, this tends to
yeah,
happen. I remember
yep,
another thing but I haven't heard of it lately, but in the 70s and 80s, people kept saying that they had developed like telepathy and precognition and psychic soldiers. And this kept happening on both the Russian and American military, kept having psychic soldier groups that believed this and would actually claim they could, blow up an airplane with your thoughts and track people with telepathy and stuff. It kept coming in. So, junk science and pseudoscience keeps entering law enforcement over and over and over.
yeah. Well, it goes back that the Russians, this was part of the Cold War, and the
Yeah.
Russians were claiming that they were able to do it. So the United States, we
Yeah.
can't fall behind. So we got suckered into that, is what I'll say.
Well,
How's
and of
that?
course, like so many things, if it worked, it would be awesome. And if you somehow throw some technology on it, like DNA or AI or something, then it sounds more plausible. And
Right.
but anyway,
But I will tell you that some of the psychic stuff that was done went to Lawrence Livermore Lab, and the PhDs, the people there had been fooled by it,
yeah,
and the person that did it happened to be a magician, and it was just
right,
a magic trick.
right. And that's just something. Uri Geller did it, and he pointed out something which I thought was very interesting. He said PhDs and science people are more gullible and easier to fool. And I thought about that because I'm totally that guy. And I realized it's true because all my childhood I read science fiction and I thought about what if you could go faster than light? What if they're aliens? So my whole training was to accept an implausible idea and then spin it out to the consequences. That's part of science, right? I'm going to do this
Right.
experiment because if this works, then I could do that. Then I could do that. It is the way you think, whereas a more hands-on practical person would just say, I build bricks, this is nonsense.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And so it does make sense. You're predisposed to start with an idea that might be false, but then spin it off into what might happen.
Yeah, or your learning has been kind of pigeonholed and narrowly focused,
Yeah.
and you don't think of things like, oh, maybe that's a magic act, or
Well, but
yeah,
the things we actually do are magic acts. Like we develop a new technology like DNA sequencing or AI, and suddenly we can do this amazing thing that nobody could do before. So there could be magic, right? You could really invent some gadget that does something awesome.
yeah, yeah. Well, I like he's since passed away, but Randy, the amazing Randy,
Right.
and
Exposed all
he
this.
would go on Johnny Carson's show, and he debunked, and for years he had the $1 million prize. Um, if you were a psychic or something could prove something supernatural. He had hundreds of people apply, and about 70 people actually went through and tried to do the experiment.
Yeah.
And as they were doing it, they called foul because they weren't able to do some sleight of hand.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. And Uri Geller was one of those. Uri
Right.
Geller
With
was
the
so
spoon bending.
popular in the US. Yeah, bending spoons.
Yeah.
And as the amazing Randy pointed out, he pre-bent the spoons, so it was easily done. And Uri Geller in the United States is a fraud, but do you know he's come back in Israel and
Oh,
he's just as popular in probably the last 15 years. He's as popular as ever back there, bending spoons.
And these days with the anti-vaxxers and everything, there's a increased market for science fiction fantasy in America.
Yep, 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 yep.
Well, anyway, what have you got?
All right. So, here's an interesting one. Let's talk about Chrome's incognito mode. Do you know much about that?
Not much. Just I
And
read these articles and it seemed like they just made the obvious point that all it's doing is not storing cookies, and that doesn't mean the 100 other ways they're tracking you are no longer are not running.
yeah, so Google or Alphabet was sued in a class action lawsuit because incognito mode, people thought that they were doing anonymous browsing and specifically that it wasn't being tracked.
Well, it doesn't go into your internet history anymore. That's the main thing.
Well, let me kind of tell you what happened is Google was tracking you. And if you read the terms and agreement, it said something in the fine print on page 57 that incognito mode prevents another user on a shared computer
Right.
from seeing what your history was.
Right.
But
That's
it
what it
does
does. It doesn't go in the history on that device. So your wife won't find out you went to the bad
the
website.
porn
That's what it's
sites.
for, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. But what everybody thought was you weren't being tracked by Google or advertisers or anyone else, when
Oh,
in fact you were.
but that's not, yeah, I agree, but I never thought that was the threat model. Yeah, and
Well,
that's
the
the,
way,
I don't, normal people don't really care about tracking for delivering ads. That doesn't really harm me. Privacy advocates get upset, but why do I really care what ads appear on the screen?
um, yeah, you're more likely to buy, right? If you see the same ad over and over and over and
My
over
likelihood
again.
of buying anything is pretty much zero anyway. So,
Well, Sam, that's because you're an anomaly.
I'm just
So
old
am
and
I.
cynical. I remember when I was a kid, the phone would ring and dad would pick it up and just hang up. And I said, that was some kind of garbage. I said, what was it? Some guy was trying to sell me something. I said, well, maybe you want it. He said, no, I don't want it. I don't care what it is. And I used to be the young kid. I might care. Now I'm totally the guy that I couldn't care less. Whatever it is, I don't want it.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. It's going to be something you don't want, overpriced, not needed.
Well, there's nothing I want. Like, when you talk about the AI, smart speakers and everything, I got no smart anything. I, I
Oh,
don't need any
let
of
me
that.
tell you, Sam, I bought, you're going to laugh at me. I bought an Alexa enabled microwave oven.
Oh.
Now you got to say, why did you do that?
Yeah, under what circumstance do you want to tell your microwave oven to turn on when you're not there?
Well, it's not that. It's because I can't read the front panel. And I got to tell you, on the microwave oven, and I'll tell you, I would put a cup of water in there in the
Yeah.
microwave oven and I'd press pizza
Oh,
and I'd open up the oven, and what came out? A cup of hot water. So then I put the cup of water in again and I'd press the button that says popcorn. So
oh,
I open it up and it's not popcorn, it's water. I'm making a joke there.
well,
But
yeah.
there are some people that's what they believed. It was the Star Trek
Oh,
oven.
oh, that would be awesome.
Yeah, wouldn't that be awesome? But here's the deal. They make the font so tiny,
Oh,
and there's no lighting, there's no backlighting.
oh,
So where my microwave is, it's hard to read the screen. And I just realized if I got an Alexa enabled one, all I've got to do is say microwave 30 seconds and
okay.
poof, it's done.
Okay, well,
And I got to tell you, I really like it. Nobody else in my household uses it, but I do.
yeah, well, and besides, how else would the government hear every word you speak in your house, you know?
Exactly. Exactly. Well, it's Google, right? Google Alphabet. Or sorry, Amazon.
Yeah,
Got to go. I'm with Alexa, Amazon.
yeah.
So they're listening. All right. You have another story for us.
I've only got one more, and I think you got more, so go ahead.
Yeah. So San Francisco has had a parking issue for a long, long time.
And I just
And
heard that they're going to outlaw parking like within 20 feet of the corner. So it's
yeah,
going to, yeah, much less parking spaces, which is a real problem.
I would argue, yes, it's a problem, but it sure makes things much safer. Because I can't tell you how many times there's a big truck that's parked on a corner
That's true.
and, I'm pulling out and from a stop sign, I can't see.
Well, yeah, yeah, you're right. Okay. I might
Yeah,
appreciate that,
yeah.
but boy, I don't know where the people are going to park.
Well, yeah, so that's the question, right? So what's going on is the San Francisco traffic, I forgot, SFMA, I forgot the traffic
Metropolitan
authority.
Traffic Authority or something. Yeah.
Yeah, something like that. So they decided that they're going to try, I believe that this is a test where if you're in a zone that's not a safety issue, but if you're in a zone um, that's no parking or towaway zone, that they'll text you.
Right.
And so the caveat to all this is the tow truck might be there in 5 minutes, it might be there in 5 hours, might be in 2 days, but at least they're kind of giving you the benefit of the doubt. We'll send you a text, but that doesn't include if you're parked in a bus zone, construction zone, something that's going to interfere with safety
Yeah.
or impede traffic, right?
No, I think this is a great idea because I mean, but I moved to the city. I grew up in the country and I got so many tickets because there are so many rules. You can park and pay the meter, and then you can't park on Wednesday between 1 and 3, and you can lecture that, and there's some other rule. And it's so hard to figure out if you can park. I would
Yeah,
appreciate them telling me.
yeah, I don't understand. They have all the different signs on the meters,
Yeah.
but all of these meters are now electronic. Why don't they just put it on the screen on the meter?
Well, I know why, because there's layers of legacy rules and different agencies involved and stuff. So they put up a sign and then they buy the meters. It's
Yeah, yeah,
the
all
same as
right, all
our
right.
IT. The reason your IT doesn't work is because there's like 5 different systems that aren't really integrated.
Yeah, all right. So we'll see how this works. It's an experiment in progress.
Well, see, if you want some reassuring statements, I found the statement in an article by the police saying this is a revolutionary new thing, first in the country. And then I found the article from May 2023 of Pasadena doing the same thing. So that should reassure you. It seems to be done with the usual amount of professionalism that we've grown to know and love from our government
Oh,
agencies.
great. So I've got another car story, or do
Yeah.
you have something else?
Go ahead with the other car story. This
All
is
right. So this is really interesting, and this came out this week that Toyota, and I'd never heard of this, has created an ammonia-powered car.
yeah, I thought it was a Chinese company. The one
Well,
I found.
Toyota,
Oh, the one
yeah,
I found was Chinese GAC. But if
uh,
Toyota's doing it too, that's interesting.
yeah. So, yeah, and if you know Toyota, 20 years ago, Toyota poo-pooed electric cars, and they
Right.
said the future is hydrogen.
Yeah, the CEO
Hydro,
still says that. He doesn't
yeah,
think
and
electric cars are going to make it.
yeah, and I don't think, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think Toyota really has any full electric vehicles
I
in
don't
the
know.
works. Yeah. So Tesla, Ford, who else? Rivian,
Right.
a number of American and European companies, Volvo, Mercedes, have all blown by Toyota. A lot of the Koreans now, the Hyundai, I think Ion IQ, those cars are becoming fairly popular. But I don't know. I believe that the ammonia powered car, and you might know more, has a V8 engine and somehow it's able to burn ammonia. I don't know what the byproducts are.
They claim it's
Um,
10 times cleaner than gasoline.
yeah, we'll see, right?
Yeah, I know. I don't quite know what form it's in. I know liquid ammonia is a fertilizer. We used to have it in farming country, and that stuff is really nasty.
Yeah, yeah, it is. And ammonia used to be used in place of Freon in refrigerators for air conditioning and cooling.
Yeah, and in
So
addition to being like nasty and unpleasant to be around, it also left a bunch of junk behind when it evaporated. So I think it's not very pure. At least the farm grade stuff isn't.
yeah, so ammonia is used also in gunpowder. So there's a lot of energy in it,
Yeah.
right? That's why it's in fertilizer, gunpowder. And we'll see. So, the energy is there. I just don't know how they're doing it. And this brings up another topic related, which are hydrogen cars.
Hmm.
And Toyota has a hydrogen car.
Right.
And I did a little bit of research on this. And hydrogen, if you look at it from the distribution point of making hydrogen, which by the way comes from the cracking of fossil fuels, it could come from the splitting of water, but it's too expensive.
Right.
So
There are,
the
there are
hydrogen,
there are experimental ways to make it cheaper, but right now not in production.
right, right. And when they crack crude oil, they've
Yeah.
got the hydrogen, so they got to get rid of it somehow. So
Yeah.
you might as well sell it. So the hydrogen cars, the whole station, and I was looking this up, the tanks that are in your car or that are in a hydrogen powered car are at 10,000 psi.
Mm.
So if you look at that's substantially high,
That seems
right?
to be a significant risk, especially in like an accident.
Exactly, exactly. Now they have been experimenting with liquid hydrogen, and they do have liquid hydrogen fuel tanks. But here's the catch: they tell you you cannot park inside, and you can't park in a garage. It has to be in an open area. And the reason is that you can't prevent the hydrogen from boiling or going from a liquid to a gas. So the car has to continually vent. And if you go to the airport and you park for a week or 2 weeks,
Right.
all the hydrogen will have evaporated.
And it will displace the oxygen, so it'd be unsafe for people.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. This
exactly.
used to happen in
As
bubble
well,
chambers. They made a big deal of warning people in bubble chambers because people would walk in the room and just die. Because if there's no oxygen and no CO2, you don't feel bad, you don't gasp, you just fall over and die.
yeah, yeah, yeah. You
Yeah.
become hypoxic, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So, we'll see on ammonia. I want to look in this a little bit more. Hydrogen cars, I don't see those. I think there's only one manufacturer, which is Toyota,
Yeah.
and they're kind of stuck by their guns on that.
Yeah, it sounds pretty bogus to me, and ammonia sounds pretty bogus too. That is pretty nasty stuff. If there was an ammonia gas station on every corner,
Oh,
I think there and huge trucks delivering it everywhere. I think there'd be problems.
yeah, at least, with gasoline, I don't think it's as dangerous the vapors are in comparison with ammonia.
Yeah,
Because
they're less nasty. They're less
you're right.
caustic and irritating. So
Yeah.
people will really complain about the smell if there was an ammonia gas station on your corner.
Yeah, yeah, and I believe what a derivative of ammonia was used World War One in the gassings. I One of the gases, I think, like
Hydrogen.
mustard gas, yeah,
Yeah.
was based on ammonia.
Yeah, man. We need Mr. Fusion, man. We really do. Yeah, I got
Yeah, so
one.
we'll
Yeah.
see.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, go ahead. What's your last
Yeah,
story here?
the last one is just NSO is coming back. NSO made all this spyware that could just take over your iPhone. They sold it as like a military attack weapon, but then
So,
they were caught. An Israeli hacking team or another Israeli company made it. The NSO made these spyware tools intended for police and law enforcement to spy on what everybody's doing on their phone. But then they sold it to all sorts of repressive regimes while lying about it. And so they ended up on the entity list. So now United States agencies are barred from using it and they can't market it in the US, and it's really crippling the company. But now, because of the Ukraine war, or I think the Hamas war, or else the Ukraine war, one of these wars, it's making a comeback. Uh, and
so
yep, it's the Hamas war.
who's
They're
HSO
NSO is the
or NSO?
spyware group that makes these weapons that will infect a phone, and now you can get all the messages and everything off the phone and find out where it is. And what they're doing is they're saying they can track where the hostages are that have been kidnapped by Hamas with this technology. And therefore, they're claiming that their product is valuable, and they're paying millions of dollars for lobbying to try to get reinstated as an acceptable vendor in the United States, and it might work. And
So
they
what?
even published a transparency report, which is, by the way, completely bogus, claiming again that they didn't really sell to all those nasty people, which they totally sold to. But the people may be inclined to accept this fake excuse because the need for this device is enough to justify overlooking the human rights concerns.
So what you're saying, it's kind of like what the US military did after World War II.
Right,
And we decided that we're not going to have any avid Nazis
right,
immigrate, come to the United States, except when we need them because they have technology we need.
right. And that's right. And this is the point. In time of
Yeah.
war, you lower your scruples and accept compromises to get the all important weapon, even though you have to like overlook some human rights abuses. And they might be right. This Israel Hamas war might be their opportunity to come back into the market. I was surprised when I read this that last year, Biden passed an executive order banning American government agencies from purchasing spyware, which is an interesting move. Um,
Really?
yeah. So we are trying to have the moral high road there, at least publicly. Now, I think the NSA totally does make this stuff and use it. I don't think government agencies abstain from using spyware. Maybe they aren't allowed to buy it. Not letting you buy it from foreign vendors might make sense, but telling them not to use it, not to develop it, I don't think that's practical.
Yeah, I don't think so either.
Yeah.
That would put us at a disadvantage.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So, and isn't, I mean, kind of related, isn't that what Snowden was all about? Was we found the NSA was spying on Americans?
Right. And that's his issue, of course, is that the NSA is only supposed to spy on foreigners. But in
Correct.
fact,
Yeah.
they're spying on Americans too. And especially with the Patriot Act and the national security letters and this horrible thing called parallel reconstruction, where the NSA can find stuff they're not legally allowed to have, and they can hand it off to the FBI, who's not legally allowed to use it, and the FBI can then spin a fiction story about how they got it from a non-existent informant and present that in court, and all this is somehow accepted when it seems outrageously illegal. It's it's our civil liberties seem to be observed more in the breach than the actual following them.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, this is why you've got these conspiracy theorists. Sometimes these conspiracies are true.
Well, this is why you need all the EFF and the ACLU and all these protest movements
Exactly.
trying to hold back government abuses. Government will naturally just try to seize more and more power over you in the name of protecting the children.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And this Israeli company, are they the ones that make oxygen?
No, I think they made
Is that a different company? So oxygen, so people know, is a cell phone forensic tool to
yeah.
get a dump of what the data is on a cell phone.
I think these guys made Pegasus, which is
Okay,
the
which
famous
is
malware.
okay. So,
Yeah.
would you buy would you buy software
Yeah.
from a company that
Yeah.
makes malware?
Yeah, well, that you buy weapons, you're dealing with rotten people, and you buy machine guns or something. They probably are also selling machine guns to your enemies. This is how it goes,
Yeah, yeah,
and that's why there's an endless push back and forth on this.
yeah, I got it. Well,
Anyway,
I'm out of stories for
yeah,
today. How
yeah, me
about
too.
you?
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
enough
all
for
right.
today. All right,
So I
we'll be
think
back.
this is a wrap.
Yep, we'll be back on Tuesday.
Be back Tuesday.
All right.